very different customs and identity. With those two groups, you have two major diasporas coming to America around the turn of the 20th century. So they established themselves, like all good immigrant communities at the turn of the 20th century, on the Lower East Side of New York, right? They built synagogues, they built community centers, they built local burial societies. So my community in New York City, Kehila, Kedosha, Janina, the synagogue was formed in 1927. It was built on the Lower East Side, a small tenement synagogue. The community incorporated in 1906, originally as a burial society. Why? Because when a Roman Jew, a young Jewish boy, was walking on the Lower East Side, he's maybe 16 or 17, he's hit and killed by a horse and buggy. Unfortunately, they go to the local Ashkenazi Chevra Kedosha or burial society, say, hey, we need to bury this guy. You know he's a Jew. They didn't believe he was Jewish. They said, we won't bury him. So the Roman Jews were forced to build their own burial society and their own institutions to house their customs and traditions, and frankly, make sure that they can protect their community and their rights to be Jewish, frankly.
Wow, so it all started from this particular instance where a young boy was killed, and there was no division before that? There was no conversation between the two communities, Ashkenazi and Romaniote?
Not really. So when the Romaniote community came and the Sephardic community came, frankly, the existing Ashkenazi community in New York, you have the German Jews who came in the 1820s, and you have the Ashkenazi Jews who start coming in the 1880s, 1890s from Eastern Europe, didn't think we were Jewish at all. They didn't trust us. We tried to, our communities tried to engage. We said, no, listen, we're Jewish, we might pray differently, etc. They said, nope, you're not Jewish, we don't believe you. You don't speak Yiddish. How could you be Jewish, right? So there was this really issue of, frankly, direct discrimination, and I would use the term Ashkenormative racism, right? This discrimination that was faced by our communities when they came here. So they had to build their own institutions.
Okay, I see. So ever since that divide, would you say that today the relationship between the two communities has smoothed over? Maybe that's an impact from post-World War II, post-Shoah, like more in the modern era. Do you know when that happened? If there is that better.
So obviously you see a whole change, when after an immigrant community, they start establishing themselves, the next generation gets a college degree, the next generation like that moves away from the Lower East Side. So over time you have, a greater effusion of Jewish cultures, whether it be Ashkenazic, Sephardic, Romaniote, Middle Eastern. So that makes things a bit better, obviously. You also have things, at the turn of the 20th century, to have a Greek Jew and an Ashkenazic Jew marry was called an intermarriage, right, at the time. So that was a very big controversy. Today, everybody's a product of this so-called intermarriage, right? That's a normal thing. Everybody's happy. I myself, my father's Sephardic, my mother's Ashkenazi. So that's a very normal thing. And, thank God it's much better now. But there are still challenges today in terms of how the Ashkenazi community recognizes minority Jewish communities like the Romaniote community, like the Sephardic community from Greece, and how they respect the customs and traditions and work together to have a better dialogue about the greater kind of effusion of Jewish culture.
So did you grow up going to an Ashkenazi shul in conjunction with the Sephardic shul, the Romaniote shul, or was it just the complete separation? Did you just go to one? That's
a great question. So I grew up going to that Romaniote synagogue, Kehila, Kedosha, Janina, right? So that is my home base. I was my Brit Milah, my circumcision was there, my Bar Mitzvah was there. God willing, one day maybe my wedding will be there. Who knows? But that is my community. That's what I grew up going to. In addition to that, I went to an Ashkenazic Hebrew school, right? Because at the time, the synagogue didn't have any infrastructure to support kind of youth activities. So I would also go to an Ashkenazic Hebrew school to help teach me some of the basics and kind of fuse those two to learn from both.
I see. Okay. So just to make sure that we covered all the different aspects of the Romaniote community, how does it compare to other Jewish communities in America? Like you mentioned the Sephardic community, but there is a differentiation between the two, if I'm not wrong. So could you just clarify that for our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Romaniote community, like I mentioned, date their lineage over 2,000 years in Greece and the former Ottoman Empire, what is basically what was then the Byzantine Roman Empire, right? That's what they're called, Romaniote, as reference to the Eastern Roman Empire. So this community developed very many unique customs that are different from Ashkenazi, certainly, and definitely different even from Sephardic and Middle Eastern Jewry. For example, they spoke a dialect of Judeo-Greek. They never spoke Ladino or Judeo-Spanish. They never spoke Yiddish, right? So they brought that here when they came to the US in the early 20th century. They also had several unique customs that were special to their community, in addition to some unique pismonim or piyutim, which are versions of Hebrew or Judeo-Greek poetry that is sung on certain holidays, right? That's very unique. These are other unique customs, such as the creation of something called an aleph. An aleph was this like almost birth certificate amulet that 40 days after the birth of a baby boy, it would be created with a lot of Kabbalistic symbols, beautiful watercolors, and placed above the crib of the boy for the first year to protect him. And it would have references to the forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. It would list the names of the father and the grandfather. And it was a very unique custom only to the Romeo community. So that's one of many examples of kind of unique identity and customs in the community.
That's interesting, since I did my master's in Jewish studies at Hebrew University, and I remember doing a section about medieval Jewish life. And I know that in the Ashkenazi tradition, there was this Lilith, this myth of Lilith and this protection of babies. So it's interesting that even though each Jewish culture, Jewish community has different ways of practicing this, that there is still this protection of babies and this myth behind being able to save them for the forefathers, save them from the people in times of great persecution. So this might come from that, but also this differentiation. Clearly, this is much older than this tradition in the medieval times. So that clear distinction that maybe these Ashkenazi communities in Poland had heard from their Romaniote friends down south in Greece about all this. So anyway, that just made me think of that. So that's really great to see how these parallels between Jewish communities exist. So you've mentioned it multiple times, but just to ask you the question directly, what is the Kehila that you were home based in? How important is the synagogue to the Romaniote community in New York, and in the US as well, considering the other different areas that Greek Jews might live?
Sure. So Kehila Kedosha Janina, like I mentioned, was built. The physical building was built in 1927. It is the only Romaniote synagogue in the Western Hemisphere. So when the Greek Jews first came to the United States, that was the first synagogue they built. Later on, they built a few others, notably in uptown in Harlem and in Brooklyn, in Mapleton. Eventually, those two synagogues did close and kind of consolidated back to this one. So today, it really remains kind of the bastion of Romaniote Jewish life in America and in the Western Hemisphere, right? We have Jews from all around the world who are on our newsletter, who engage in genealogical research through our museum, who visit our museum every day, every month. And we have people who participate from around the world. It still remains really a home base for the New York metropolitan area for the Greek Jewish community, both the Romaniote and Sephardic. We have many Jews who come every Shabbat, every Tefillah. We have all the holidays. So it's a very important center for religious life, for communal life, for social life, right? We have our Young Professionals Network that we're really trying to engage the next generation of Romaniote and Sephardic Jews. And we really remain this kind of hub for the community, whether it be through that research, like I mentioned, genealogy, heritage, history, culture, or religion, right? We do have tefillah every Shabbat and holidays.
Mm-hmm. And so since it's the only one in the Western Hemisphere, which I was not aware of, honestly, until our conversation now, would you say that, like, are there other Jewish immigrants from around the Western Hemisphere? Like, what's the percentage of like Americans versus non-Americans perhaps that attend this synagogue?
So the synagogue, most of our participants today are fourth, fifth, and even sixth generations from the original immigrants, right? Most of these immigrants came around the turn of the 20th century. They had children, their children had children, their children had children, right? So you already 3 or 4 or 5 generations through. I myself am a product. My grandfather immigrated here from northern Greece, albeit from a Sephardic heritage, but my grandfather. So I'm already 2 or 3 generations removed. So it's mostly the generations beyond that. We have a
I think we're experiencing some technical difficulties. So just a moment as Ethan comes back on. Essentially, I didn't really realize oh, Ethan, you're back. There you go. So it was, you were talking about your grandfather's family being from northern Greece, 3 generations removed. That's where we...
Right. So right, perfect. So most of the people who attend services today are multi-generational families, or people who've become more interested in their heritage, or also we do have a few people who still are first-generation Americans, particularly those who came from Greece after, unfortunately, their experience in the Holocaust. They are Greek Jewish survivors from the Holocaust. primarily from Athens, but also from other places like Janina, where this community is originally from, and other smaller towns like Volos, Kanya, etc. We have a few community members who are still survivors who are still here today.
Wonderful. And how many people would you say in the total congregant population are there? Like how many people attend or at least are on the list to attend?
So it's hard to determine how many Roman or Greek Jews there are in general in America, let alone New York City, right? Demographics are not the easiest thing. We do have a newsletter that goes out to over 10,000 people around the world, right? So it's quite significant. And we do have a community base that consistently attends as well. So that's really been wonderful as a resource for the community.
I see. And we now have Marcia joining us. Marcia, can you hear us? Let's see. Marcia, can you hear us? Let's see. Okay, so Marcia is the museum director of the Kehila that Ethan has been explaining to us. Oh, yes. Okay, Marcia, can you hear us now?
I can hear you, yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, so I just introduced you to our audience. Ethan was just explaining how many people are part of the listserv for Kehila around the world, as well as how many people attend, and just the Romaniote experience in New York. We're just getting through that and how important the synagogue is in the entire Western Hemisphere, not just in New York and in the US. So if you don't mind me asking you, so what Ethan gave us a whole rundown, but just from your perspective as being the museum director, what's the experience like welcoming people to the museum? I'm assuming that a lot of them aren't Romaniote. So what's that relationship, that outreach between the two communities like?
Okay, well, we are a very welcoming community. We get people from all over the world. We get many, many Greek Jews that come in, many Israelis that come in. People are fascinated with us, and we build bridges all along the way. We have an excellent relationship with the Greek Orthodox community in New York, with the consulate, with the Archbishop. And I think one of the important aspects about us is how we were defined by other people and how we don't wish to define other people in the same way. For us, we weren't Jewish enough for the Jews, and we weren't Greek enough for the Greeks. So we found our own little niche. And if anything, I think we're an example of how important it is to be self-confident about who you are as a person, as a community. We weren't going to throw into the towel. Everybody thought we should shut our doors, but we weren't going to do that. We are going to be approaching soon 100 years. And we're an active community with a vibrant youth. I mean, Ethan is an example of that. What else can I add? I feel so bad coming in late on this, but technical difficulties. Okay. And
well, I was going to ask. Oh, go ahead. No, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what you didn't cover. Did Ethan cover how the Romaniote community compared to other Jewish communities in America? Okay. And I covered the importance of the synagogue. What would I want the American Jewish community to know about our community? We're here. You know, it's amazing. We have the longest continuous presence in the European diaspora. We're one of only 4 synagogues on the Lower East Side. We were the 404th when we opened up, and one of only 4 now south of Houston. And yet most of the world doesn't know we exist. And that to us is painful, and it becomes particularly painful when you talk of the Holocaust, because our losses were so tremendous. By the way, for our Yom HaShoah, we have a packed house, something that many other synagogues cannot say. We have a very dedicated community, and they show up for our events, and we have some excellent events. Of course, the street festival is the epitome of what we do. And we fill the street with joy, with music, with food. And the surrounding communities, both the Asian and the Spanish, join us in our festivities. I'm leaving for Greece soon, so I'm on the high right now. You know.
There you go. After the festival, are you going to Greece?
I'm leaving the 31st.
Okay, so about a week after, yeah?
Right, exactly.
Nice. Where in Greece are you going to?
This time around, I'm going to Corfu, Yanina, Castoria, Thessaloniki, Salonika, Volos, Trikala, Larissa, and to Athens.
Okay.
Be 2 weeks.
Okay. And it won't be so hot yet. June isn't quite that hot in Greece. I remember in my time.
Yeah,
Yes.
not quite that hot. Uh, July and August become stifling.
Yes.
You know, global warming is very much a reality in Greece.
I've been in Greece in August for a couple weeks, and yeah, I learned what heat meant. Definitely. I knew what 40
Yeah,
Celsius meant. I did not know that before I went. And then yeah, that was
right.
um
And we were actually lucky. A couple of years ago, Cyprus went up to 127 degrees.
oh wow.
Not Celsius, Fahrenheit. Yes, right.
Yes. Oh wow. Um, so Ethan, is there anything that you'd like to add to what Marcia said about wanting the American Jewish community to know about your community?
I think Marcia summed it up well in saying that we're here, right? We're here and we have a voice, we have a unique heritage, and we have a unique tradition that's very important not only to be known among the wider Jewish community, but to be a part of the narrative of the wider Jewish community. You know, it's not always matzah balls and gefilte fish. It's
Thank
borekas and keftes de prasa, which are, prasa keftedes, which are Greek leek patties, which are delicious for Passover and Rosh Hashanah. We have many unique traditions and many unique Torah and philosophical perspectives that can really help be a part of the greater Jewish narrative and how to live a Jewish life in America today.
Mm-hmm. So Marcia, you mentioned some neighbors that join you in the festival that aren't Jewish. Would there be something that you'd want the non-Jewish population of New York to know about your community? Because again, I'm assuming that most New Yorkers who aren't Jewish, and even if they are Jewish, don't know that your community exists, as you said. So what would you want them to
Yeah, I would say that the majority of people who are actually at our festival are not Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
And they come to enjoy our traditions, our culture, especially our music and our food. And it's delightful to watch the Spanish population, the Asian population, join with our Greek Jewish population in dancing. On, are you going to be there?
I will be there. Yes, we have
Okay.
me and my colleague will be there.
Okay, very good. Then you'll see exactly what goes on. It's a lot of fun, it really is.
Okay.
And if I want to give credit on this, Andrew Marcus, Ethan's older brother, was the initiator of this event, and it's become our major fundraiser in the synagogue and museum. And it gets bigger every year. We survived COVID, and we opened up with a soft opening last summer, and then we're back on a full festival now.
Okay. How many years has the festival been running? So our audience knows.
I think
This
it's
will actually be the 9th year, believe it or not.
Wonderful.
9th, okay.
So the Big 10 is next year.
The Big 10 is coming up next year, correct?
Amazing. Okay. So how can, aside from going, oh, go ahead, Marcia.
I said it's interesting how other communities are now taking the lead. They recently had a Sephardic street a festival in, I believe it was San Francisco, and but we're still the biggest one and one of the only ones in the world that do what we do. And you know, imitation is the greatest compliment. So go ahead, imitate us. You'll never do it as well as we do it.
That is very true. Imitation is the greatest compliment. So aside from the festival and people coming and supporting the food, the music, the culture, how else can people get involved in supporting your community in New York, whether they're Jewish or not?
Well, get on our mailing list. We now go out to close to 15,000 households throughout the world, and that's not counting those people who pass our newsletter on to other people. We only do it once a month. It tells you about the Greek Jewish world, both here and in Greece, and brings in interesting stories from both the non-Jewish Greek world and the Sephardic and Roman Greek world.
I would also add, come attend any one of our programs. Come for Tefillah on Shabbat, right? We're open every Shabbat, so come experience what a real Roman Shabbat is like, and truly feel involved and connected to the community. And also for our special Shabbat lunch kiddush, we always have a Greek kosher kiddush. That's always delicious. Come to the museum. Come for a museum tour any Sunday or by special request, or volunteer to participate in an event, volunteer at the festival, volunteer even to be a docent at the museum, which can always help sustain and teach people from inside the community and outside the community. There's so many ways to get involved, really.
That's amazing.
Thank you. It definitely is. Yeah.
So just at this time, if there's anything that you want to add that we haven't discussed yet. If there's anything you want to say about your community, about the Kehila, about the festival, now would be the time.
Make sure to join us May 21st for the Greek Jewish Festival. It's going to be a fantastic day from 12 to 6 p.m. on 280 Broome Street on the Lower East Side of New York. We're going to have kosher Greek food, live Greek, Sephardic, and Israeli music, dancing, museum tours, kids activities. Last year we had over 10,000 people, so it's going to be packed. And food sells out quick. It sells out by 3 o'clock, so you better get there early to get amazing food. May 21st. You can check out the website at GreekJewishFestival.com.
Amazing. Okay. Well, I guess that's all she wrote. Thank you both so much for joining today. This was a really great conversation, and I really hope that people can learn about your community and come check out the festival, not just this year, but in years to come. So thank you all so much, and thank you for the work that you do in the Greek Jewish community in New York. We hope that you have many more years in the shul and many more years of celebrations. Thank you both so much.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Catherine.
Yep, no problem. Thank you both.